Hi, everyone. I am Jason Morgan, editor of Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted, the video interview series that connects you with the top minds of the industry. Today, I have Sara Howes, Senior Director, Insights and Experience with Decisiv. Sara, thank you for joining us. How has the remote from home work been? How are you still supporting customers while staying at home?
Decisive actually is really great. We've always been well primed to be remote. We've got people all over the world. So we're used to engaging with each other productively via remote purposes. So I think we've been good. Our focus really the past month or so has been on finding ways to help people understand how they can use the platform that we do offer to basically go paperless, really facilitate less need for in-person contact. And luckily, we're in a good position to do that.
For sure. So then you're like a video conference like pro, and so I hope it's still new to me, so I hope my etiquette will be okay.
We'll have a lesson later, yeah.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to let me add to your busy conference schedule, I'm sure. So today we're talking about service from what you've seen on the Decisiv end of how it's been impacting the industry, and maybe some tips, as you pointed out, the paperless one is great for fleets of how they can start really keeping an eye on their service to make sure that the trucks they have running will remain running, right? We've heard lots of different reports of this impacting fleets in a lot of different ways. So we'll kick it off just with the first question. From what you've seen working with the data with Decisiv, how has the pandemic recently impacted fleet service operations as a whole?
Right. Well, first of all, I do want to quickly say, on behalf of everybody at Decisiv, how thankful we are to the entire industry right now. We know how hard it is, we know the challenges, and we appreciate the sacrifices and the commitment the drivers and the fleets are making today, providers too. So a big thank you to everybody on the road and to the people who are keeping the trucks in service and supporting the people on the road. Had to get that out of the way.
For sure. No, very important. 100% agree.
Secondly, to specifically answer your question, we regularly see roughly 60,000 service events created on a weekly basis in our platform. And you might find it surprising, but we've only seen a slight dip in those numbers since March 1st, really no more than about 10%. But that really means the important part thing there is that 90% of the service activity we're used to seeing is still there, just as it always has been. And frankly, I think that's to be expected. Assets are in extremely high demand right now, and by extension, are going to be very heavily utilized. So keeping them in service is paramount for many reasons. There's no real surprise then that number of service events is remaining relatively high. We're also still seeing normal patterns, I think, in terms of the types of service being conducted, including preventative maintenance. So there is, after all, a direct correlation between constant, regular maintenance and uptime. The better you take care of an asset through preventative maintenance, the better that asset will serve you and likely will help you keep costs down, since it's going to minimize repairs between PMs and also breakdown repairs, which of course are often so much more expensive and certainly more unpredictable.
For sure. So one of the things that we've been talking a lot about with others and hearing about, and of course, there's the hours of service exemption, right? So it's good to hear that the service schedules might be staying kind of within normal ranges, but chances are that maybe some of these fleets are running differently, right?
Right.
The hours they're running are differently. In terms of the maintenance component failures, things they might just want to cast a wide net on, looking to make sure that when it is in the bay, it does get caught. What do you recommend fleets keeping an eye on in terms of those service data points?
Right. So our reports are really showing that, the number of PMs included on estimates created on our platform is relatively flat right now. So we're consistently seeing more than 130,000 operations on estimates per week. And of those, the percent of PMs is also staying consistent. And I think that's great. Like I said before, you really want to make sure that your PMs are not being ignored, even if you're going to stretch out the time between addressing things like creature comforts or less severe issues, right? We think people are conducting service more or less the way they normally have, which again makes sense in a way because it's the one of the best ways to keep your asset in service and optimize its performance. But fleets who may need to make a choice about extending PMs, it's a pretty easy determination, I think. Maintenance on critical systems like engines or drivetrains or refrigeration units, and any maintenance related to safety and performance are going to be the things that you don't want to defer, because they obviously can lead to the most catastrophic failures. So anything to do, like I said, with smaller, less critical systems or creature comforts, the AC or the radio can oftentimes stretch a bit longer if you need to. The best thing I think you can do, honestly, is evaluate your PM schedules for your fleet proactively. So if you manage your PM schedules in the Decisiv platform, for example, you can get daily alerts on what's coming due even when your unit is in for an unrelated repair. So that really enables you to plan according to what your fleet's current needs are. The three really critical things I think you need to pay attention to make sure you are catching issues before they become problematic are your regular inspections, your DVIRs and your DOT inspections, high severity faults, and critical recalls. So those are going to be the early warning systems, and fleets in our platform can monitor those. But we can talk about DVIRs, and the telematics there, the recalls, those aren't changing in terms of frequency or legal requirements, for example, especially with those inspections.
Right.
So you'll continue to get those, and you ought to be able to, fairly easily surmise whether something needs attention. Monitor your tread depth on tires and your brake measurements, right? Watch the safety and performance reports and be proactive there.
Right.
Calls obviously will let you get out ahead of something catastrophic if you book service to resolve it proactively. And then, of course, your telematics really and other fault code readings, those should be your last alarm, right? Those hopefully are the last clue that something is wrong. But they will let you know when something's really awry.
Interesting. So definitely visibility. I mean, almost like near real time, right? You want to be having that visibility, seeing those reports come through, making sure the DVIRs are being completed correctly, and they're just not kicking the tires to check inflation and that kind of thing, right?
Exactly, exactly. And if you need to extend PMs, if you need to do that for a while, you'll know whether that's working for you or not. The really telling thing to see if that is working will be the number of unplanned maintenance events between planned service events, right?
Right.
So if that number fluctuates or goes up dramatically, you may want to reevaluate your approach because your costs and your utilization will definitely suffer in that scenario, and likely you may have to park that asset.
Right, right. Well, and definitely dramatically. Do you have a threshold for like when like dramatically is too dramatic? Like when you start looking, is there a you'll a couple some things you just can't do anything about.
Right.
But, being able to spot that trend. Is there any advice there?
I don't know if there's a particular magic number or anything like that, but if you see exponential or a fairly high percentage increase in those, you know, maybe even just eyeball it. What's normal for your fleet, right? Um, if you feel like that number has increased to a point where the trade-off of waiting a little while to take care of a PM is now costing you more than those breakdowns in between, or if you feel like that percentage of breakdown instances is now at a point that is problematic to you, because obviously that means a lot of disruption in your service.
Right.
So I think that's going to have to be a fleet by fleet determination. Your
For
provider can probably help you figure that out as well.
For sure. And, I mean, not only that, everyone wants to stay safe on the roads. They want to take care of drivers as much possible because, as you pointed out at the top of our talk, they have the super difficult job
Right.
being out there on the road, and you want to support them as much as possible. And no one likes getting the truck is down phone call.
Right, right. You like your
And
truck, you want your truck, you don't want it out of service for several days. Exactly.
for Sure. Well, and I think that leads into the next question of really working with those service providers. I
Mhm,
mean, Decisiv's bread and butter is making those connections, right?
mhm.
So, from a fleet manager point of view, what do I need to communicate with my service partners in terms of making those maintenance decisions or changing the schedule, or even just kind of staying in communication, letting them know what's going on in the event that something does occur?
Right. So the nice thing is that in the decisive ecosystem anyway, that type of communication is already a regular occurrence. Whether the fleet is communicating directly to a preferred provider or to a call center or a managed care provider, that information is already being exchanged every day through regular contact on, individual service events or in passing when they're coordinating business on a regular basis. Uh, the benefit of conducting that communication through our platform, through the Decisive platform, really is that it then automatically becomes a part of the record for assets in fleets. So expectations on both sides, both the fleet and the provider side, can be set. And it's less likely that those changes would fall through the cracks or have to be repeated a million times on a million different phone calls, right? Um, but to my mind, the service provider business really has always been highly responsive to customer changes in their maintenance practices, whether it's campaigns or scheduled maintenance or unscheduled maintenance. So, short of proactively communicating desired changes early and often to your preferred vendors, I don't know that a whole lot really needs to change. It's that constant open communication. Let them know as early and as often as you can.
Right, right. Well, and you had mentioned earlier the paperless angle and now the visibility into the whole thing and make sure everyone's on the same page, which is something I can appreciate as my entire company is working from home. And you do realize that when you're not down the hall from someone, and every fleet's different, they're all essential, but you
Mhm,
might have to be distancing. They might have people that are furloughed that have to be kept in the loop, right?
mhm.
Having that digital breadcrumb trail of, okay, here's what everybody said, here's where I need to go look is super, super helpful for sure.
It is, right. And you get that per case, you can look that up for each service event you have, and then it becomes part of the record, shared knowledge between the two institutions, and that does wonders for making sure that those messages and those expectations are relayed appropriately.
Right, right. And one of the things that has been cropping up in conversations like this too is how that creates that digital historic record that
Mhm.
now oh, hey, that's happened 5 times. I should probably, it's not a one-off. I should probably take care of this or find out the real cause of what's happening. So,
Right. And to your point about the paperless thing, we've had several dealers in our network um, be able to go completely paperless, to the point that they unplug their printer in the service area and just take it out, right? And I think that's great. I think that's what we should be striving for at this point, because think how fewer touch points you have in a scenario like that. And it's completely possible with the platform today. So the communication, the estimate, discussion about parts, even just between the tech and the parts desk, it's all there. And then the fleet customer just needs to stay on top of the emails and the messages that they get to approve, defer, whatever it is that they want to do for that particular event. And it's all there, like you said, in that history. So I think that's great.
right, for sure. I love that they took the printout. I mean, what technician corral doesn't want to go reenact that Office Space scene where they just destroy the
Right.
printer? So no, definitely productivity and fun. So that's excellent. Well, Sarah, I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been super helpful. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
I hope so. Thank you for having me.